afternoon, everyone. Um, Thanks, Professor Ashok, for the invitation. And I'm perhaps the only civil engineer among this lot of speakers who are primarily from mechanical and aerospace background. So I will talk about buildings and how fires play a role in safeguarding or non-safeguarding the building. So primarily, I'll talk about two things in the backdrop of the fact that every fifth death due to fire in the world happens in India, and that the modern buildings, according to our studies, are at a greater risk of fire than they were earlier. So I'll talk about interior scenarios through one case study and exterior scenarios through another case study, and then we'll summarize. So this is a fire which recently happened in Delhi, where after a relatively short fire, the building collapsed. And this is something which doesn't happen very often. So normally for building fires, life safety is of primary importance, and a lot of the operations are carried out in the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes. And in general, the buildings usually remain safe. That's the usual notion. But in this case, that didn't happen. The firemen got trapped, a portion of the building collapsed. And we'll try to see how the time temperature curve of a typical fire or a compartment fire, how that relates to the operations. And then I will try to explain in what way the modern building loads, fire loads have increased from an interior scenario. So this is a typical fire curve used for design or analysis of compartments or buildings. So on the y-axis is the temperature, x-axis are the operations or time. This curve is sort of the real fire curve, where it starts with some ignition, there is a smoldering, and then an event happens which is called flashover, which is a very small smoldering fire suddenly becomes a full compartment fire due to radiation, radiative feedback from the ceiling, the hot gases which are accumulated at the ceiling. And this green curve is the so-called standard fire curve, or the ISO 834 curve. This is typically used in design. So when we say that a structural member or a beam or a column is 30 minutes fire rated, what we mean is that given 30 minutes of this exposure, it will remain safe. That's the idea. And most of the operations, like use of extinguishers or action of sprinklers or fires or smoke detectors, etc., that will happen in the pre-flashover region, which is the smoldering stage. So the sprinklers are a fire control mechanism, not really a fire extinguishing mechanism. And evacuation also has to be done before that, because once flashover happens, the temperatures within the entire compartment would be more than 600-700 degrees Celsius, which are untenable conditions for anyone to survive. So if we are not out of the building by that time, chances of survival are extremely low. And in the post-flashover part is where the structural strength becomes important. And most of the buildings now, since we are building tall, it is not possible actually to evacuate everyone from the building. So the design philosophy of tall buildings is basically to stay in place and to ensure that the fire will not reach you, essentially, and the building will remain safe. So the more we build tall, the structural safety, etc., becomes more important. For a one-story building, it's easy relatively. I mean, there is a fire, you can just run out. For a 3-story structure, a little more difficult, but imagine a 30-story or a 50-story structure. From the top floors, it is just not possible to escape. In the way this curve behaves will depend on the amount of combustibles in a compartment. So for example, if this auditorium were to catch fire, maybe at some corner a fire will start, and then it will depend on how much fire load we have. Fire load in terms of the stage, which is of wood, or the acoustic panels, or the chairs, or other electronic equipment like plastics. So these are what will make the fuel. And then the other limiting factor will be ventilation, the amount of oxygen or fresh air which is available. So what we did was we studied the availability of load, or the fire load, or the amount of combustibles inside compartments. Okay, and we compared that with earlier data and data of some other countries. So this is one study that we did in Ahmedabad. And what we found was that, excuse me, the average FLED is the fire load energy density, basically megajoules of load per square meter of a building. What we found was that the average was somewhere around 1300. Whereas a comparable study which happened in Kanpur about 20 years ago, that was around 350. So basically from in 20 years, this has become almost 4 times practically. Okay. And the Indian code, so the earlier version of the code specified a number for design, that what is the level of FLED to be used for compartment designs, and that number was 425. So this number from the 20 years ago data is okay, but from the current data perspective, it is actually 1/3 of that. And for a really performance-based design, most of the leading codes suggest that an 80th percentile of the FLED is to be used. So if you assume a normal distribution, a mean will be a 50th percentile. So 80th percentile will be even more than 1300. It will be close to 1900 sort of number. So basically, the designs are severely underestimating the fire load. So a similar kind of survey in a different type of building. So this was for office buildings, this was for residential buildings. And again, the scenario is similar. What we found was around 1400. 20 years ago, it was around 500. So the factors are about the same. So this will perhaps indicate that the risk of fire has increased. Right, and one more thing before I show you some more interesting results is the proportion of the combustibles. So earlier, most of the combustible materials were cellulosic in nature, and these were all solid wood type of natural wood or natural fabrics, for which the burn rates were lower, and the combustible gases that came out were less toxic. Nowadays, the amount of plastics is increasing, so now it's almost 20% plastics is what we found, whereas in the earlier studies, the amount of plastics was almost 2%, 1 to 2%. So there was almost 95 to 98% of cellulosic materials. So this, of course, again has potential to burn faster and create more toxic fumes compared to solid wood. This is a short video which shows on the left-hand side, there is a compartment which is furnished with natural furniture. So which is let's say this is the scenario 20 years ago. And this is the compartment, same compartment, but furnished with modern furniture or things like particle boards, more plastics, more synthetic fibers. And these were, it was started at the same time, the fire. And let us observe how it goes. So at this point of time, the fire here is small, the fire here is also small. It's just somewhere at the back. And around this time, you will see that a lot of black soot is coming on the synthetic side, but this one is still a bit clean. You can still see what's happening inside. Okay. And now the roof region is already getting saturated with hot smoke, which means a flashover will follow suit very soon, because this is the layer which gives radiative feedback to the rest of the furniture, and the room suddenly catches fire. Whereas this one is still smoldering in a way. So this is the situation after just 3.5 minutes. And this is the modern or synthetic room. And here it is still in a way localized. So time to flash over here is about 3 minutes 40 seconds. And imagine that this is the time that anyone has to evacuate, or for fire sprinklers to work, or fire extinguishers to work. So this side, the time to flash over is to the order of 27 to 30 minutes, which falls in line with the earlier graph that I showed of the time temperature curve, where the smoldering region was fairly long and flashover happened a little late. Whereas this is a situation where we are currently, where the time to flashover is almost 3.5 minutes, which means the time to escape or time to carry out initial firefighting operations or to alert people, that is significantly less. So we tried to quantify this a little more. What we developed was that using the fire loads that we had, we developed the time temperature curves for potential compartments which had those things. So except all the black graphs are the developed time temperature graphs. And these red graphs, red or blue, these are the standard fire graphs. Okay, so it's the standard ones based on which the fire ratings are calculated. Okay. So what's interesting is that if you look at the first 1 hour, in the first 1 hour, the calculated time temperatures are significantly more than the standard fires. Okay. What it means is that if a particular component is rated at 30 minutes using a standard fire curve, that is going to fail earlier because it is going to see a greater temperature or it is going to see a greater gradient in temperature. Okay. And similar sort of story for both type of things. We also then calculated the probability that, so here it's the temperature actual greater than the temperature standard. So we are trying to see what is the probability that the fire temperature will exceed the standard temperature in 30 minutes and in 60 minutes. So this one is that probability in 60 minutes. So what you will see that it almost reaches 1, which means it is almost sure that the fire temperature in 30 minutes will be greater than the standard curve. In 60 minutes, which is 1 hour, it's about 20%. So 20% probability also is not that negligible. And I'll also again remind that what matters the most in terms of life safety is the first 30 minutes. And in the first 30 minutes, we are pretty much sure that the fire temperatures are going to be more. And perhaps that is the reason why we see so many intense fires nowadays. Again, this is a table from the code, just gives an idea of how fire ratings are calculated. So I will not go into the details of this calculation. But what I'll show is this graph where we took a particular reinforced concrete column and we calculated the fire ratings from different codes and under different scenarios. And this 2 and 4, this one, these two are the ratings predicted by the Indian code. Okay, and this one, 1.30 and 1.9. So 1.9 is the actual collapse time. So we have an in-house code which can compute failure times of reinforced concrete buildings subjected to fires. So what it says is that although the code is saying the fire rating is 2 hours, nothing should happen for 2 hours, the actual behavior is predicting that it will actually fail before that. And using this code, we have tried to do several performance-based evaluations. And this is another sort of counterintuitive result in general. So nowadays, since we are building tall, a lot of emphasis is there on high-strength concrete. So this is concrete which is more than 50, 60 megapascals in strength. And the conventional wisdom is that since it is higher strength, it will behave better in fire. Okay, but that doesn't happen in general. So this dotted graph is the deformation of a high-strength concrete column, whereas this one is for a normal strength concrete column. So actually it undergoes greater deformation, which means it might fail earlier. And one of the reasons for that might be something called explosive spalling. So the high-strength concrete columns have very small pores, and the water inside that converts to vapor at high temperatures creates a very large amount of pressure, and the columns can actually explode during a fire. Similarly, we have done some sort of progressive collapse sort of analysis where we see that a same building subjected to different sort of fire scenarios, how do they behave with time. Okay. And I believe these are the sort of performance-based evaluations which may be necessary for important projects. Now moving on to the exterior part of this. So these are 3 photographs from some buildings of Kanpur themselves. And I was born and brought up in Kanpur. So in my childhood, I never saw these kind of buildings which were having very shiny facades. And these facades are most of the times aluminum composite panels. And these have now been known that these panels burn very fast. These add to the risks of fire from an external side. Of course, there are a number of fires which are attributed primarily to the facade being a main component for the fire, for carrying the fire to the rest of the building. And the most notable being the Grenfell Tower, which happened in 2017. But in India also we have several examples of this. This ESIC hospital is a special mention because that happened because of loss of fire stop. Basically, between one floor to the other, usually there is a perimeter fire barrier, and this the smoke spread very rapidly because that fire barrier failed. So to study this problem more, in more depth, with UL we created a 3-story structure at IIT Gandhinagar, where we do different types of facade installations, and we do real fire tests to see their performance. Primarily, there are 2 mechanisms through which fire can spread from one compartment to the other. One is that if let's say fire starts here, then the glass of the facade will break and it will spread from outside. This kind of mechanism is called the leapfrog effect. The other is that the glass will not break, but the gap between the slab and the facade, that will give away, and the fire will spread internally. So this fire will not be visible from outside, but from inside it will spread. So this is just a view of that building. So basically it has 3 different compartments which are isolated from each other, and we are able to create different scenarios in different compartments. And our objective is to primarily study vertical spread of fire. So basically we would furnish the compartment with real fire loads, that is with real furniture, depending on the calculations that I showed earlier as to what is the appropriate fire energy density for the building type that we are trying to study. And on the face, we will have different configurations of facade or perimeter fire barrier that we want to study. And then we will start the fire, and then we will just let it go. This building is heavily instrumented with a lot of thermocouples, a lot of video cameras and IR imaging cameras to get a sense of the smoke movement and the temperature fields and the fire movement. So this is one such test where the fire stop used was a very regular type of fire stop, which is unrated, and a lot of buildings actually use it. And what we saw was, within 13 minutes, there was a fully developed fire at ground floor and first floor level, which means that if you're at the first floor, you have less than 10 minutes to find out that there is a fire on the ground floor and then escape. Okay? So the temperatures become untenable very quickly. One solution to this is a proper perimeter fire barrier, which is also what we tested. So just to show a comparison, I'll draw your attention to these 2 graphs. This is the one where an inappropriate fire stop is used. This is the one where there's a proper fire stop in place. The graph shows temperature versus time. The orange graph is the temperature time relation of the ground floor, where the fire is actually happening. So you can see that there is an initial growth phase, flashover, constant phase, and then a decay phase. This is a typical signature of a compartment fire. Now the red curve, this one, that is the temperature of the first floor. So in this case where the compartmentation is not proper, what we see is that at around 10-minute mark, the first floor temperatures rise very abruptly. Okay? And basically what that means is if we are in the first floor, then after 10 minutes there is very, very little hope of escape. Whereas in this case where there is a proper compartmentation, the first floor temperatures throughout the test would remain below 100 degrees. Although 100 degrees is also not tenable, but there is at least a greater chance of escape or less damage to the property of the first floor in case this type of thing is used. Then we did another interesting test. We were trying to replicate what happened at the Grenfell, where the cladding of Grenfell was a bit different. It had an insulation layer which was made of PIR, polyisocyanurate, which is a foam type of material. Then there was an air cavity, and then there was the cladding, which is the exterior facade. So we lined our building with that kind of material. And then let's see, this is an overall view of that same thing. So these 2 sides were lined up with that. So there is a PIR, then there is air cavity, then there is cladding. Then on the ground floor we ignited. So you can see this is all mostly real type of furniture. We had sofas and everything. And this initial fire was in a small petrol pan. And then we just allow the fire to grow. And at this point of time, you will see that there is a rapid rise of flame on the front face. And this is only at the face, and this is happening because of the air cavity. because and this is called the chimney effect, because of the air cavity between the polymer and the cladding. A lot of hot gases, they would rise up, and fresh air ingress will happen from the base. And eventually, this fire spreads very rapidly, vertically as well as horizontally. And what you'll see is these falling embers. These are basically ACP sheets which have caught fire, and they are disengaged from the frame, and they fall down. And they have a potential to start a secondary fire at the base of the building. And soon you will see that this fire reaches this corner. And because of the edge, you will see a swirling effect because the wind is flowing in that direction. So here now you can see at the corner, it's a swirling sort of effect, which actually prevented the fire to go to this face, because wind was going from right to left in this shot. And our test parameters are that once it reaches the second floor level, we would start the firefighting operations, because this is a structure that we would want to use again and again for doing different sort of tests. And this is the post-fire after it has cooled down. All the black material is the charred PIR material which has burnt. And there is the frame is still left, but you'll see that it is melted at several places because of high temperatures. Aluminum melts at around 650 degrees. And all the cladding material, which is glass or ACP, that is all gone. That is all dislodged. Okay, to summarize, the fire risks have increased. That is our hypothesis, both from internal as well as external considerations. And what we need is more rigorous quantification procedures. And basically, we need to do experiments, computer simulations. This information needs to go to codes and standards of practice for actual construction. But as of now, it might have been stopping here, but we also need to communicate and implement it properly. And hence I say that it is not just a science problem, it is also a humanities problem. We need to be able to communicate, we need to be able to create some awareness among this. So with this, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and in case there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, please. First, mention your name.
My name is Pooja Puneta, and I'm from Center for Advanced Studies. So in our institute, there is everywhere there are smoke detectors, and there are sprinkles installed. So even if there is a little smoke, that the water sprinkle. So I want to ask how are these safety measures? How will in real life situation, if there is a fire, how will these small steps will help, or even that those smoke detectors will just burn out, or what could be the situation?
Can you indicate your name?
Pooja Puneta.
So sprinklers are only useful in the first few minutes in the initial phase of the fire. And from one of the statistics that I was reading some time back, in India, around 60% of the times sprinklers do not work. Most of the buildings, so actually if you go actually by the legislation, then the so-called tall buildings should have, or high-rise buildings should have sprinkler systems. And high-rise buildings are characterized by a height of 15 meters. So if the building is below 15 meters of height, by law you are not required to have sprinklers. Now this 15 meters is above ground. You can have as many stories below ground. So that this is a very ridiculous criteria of 15 meters because basements are more problematic than the upper floors. Now in case the sprinklers do work, then of course they are very, very effective.
So in that case that sprinkle system would work in case of even the severe fire
Sorry, in case of?
In case of the fire, that is the way you showed it, will that be effective enough?
Yes, certainly. So in fact, now there are specialized sprinkler systems for facades. I have not shown that here, but we have done a test with those sprinkler systems as well. And that was extremely effective. The only question really is that whether it is installed properly and at the time of fire, whether it will work. One of the major problems that happen is the water tank which is connected to sprinklers, that is most of the times empty.
So we were just trying that experiment. So we just learned, we just lit a matchstick and we just kept that smoke coming there and the sprinkle coming. But the amount of water was very less. Means like in case of any fire, they should not be effective.
The role of sprinkler is only to keep the surroundings cool so that the fire does not grow.
And other than that, I want to ask a different question. Means like, for example, this is a closed building. In case of the scenario you just told us that there is a radiation effect and the heat just come inside in the room itself. So will that systems like this, they open up in the air? Will that work? Means like, because in the previous time we used to think that oxygen, when we talk about the more the oxygen is, the more the flame will rise. So are there now, there is a condition where we have to just open up this area so that the smoke that is generated, because the load is that much increased that would pass through the, means like it should not be in the room but outside the room.
So there are smoke extractor systems which do exactly that.
So now there is, means this is the time that when we should think more about how much air we are trying to extract out rather than thinking about the oxygen, right?
Well, there are two things. There are the smoke extractor systems. Their only purpose is that they want to maintain a particular depth of smoke. So it's measured from the ceiling. What is the depth which is safe, which will not create enough radiative feedback, right? So that is one. There is another sort of system which actually limits the percentage of oxygen in a compartment. So basically for non-manned systems like electrical rooms or unmanned server rooms, you know, the oxygen percentage is maintained below 18%, I think 16%, and that percentage of oxygen in the air would not support combustion.
Okay. So what, according to your study, because you have studied that much, what you suggest for the AC, that what should be the material that should be used in case of there is a fire because of that electrical, there would be, means like due to AC short circuiting or anything, what should be the material that should be used within the lining or periphery of that AC material?
So a typical split air conditioner, the inside unit, the one which is available for about 40-50,000, that is a plastic body, and that is prone to burning. So if that PCB burns, chances are that this body will catch fire and it will lead to a room fire. There are industrial versions available which come with metallic bodies, which are certainly safer. So if a PCB catches fire, the fire stops there. The PCB will burn and then nothing will happen. Okay? But those are of course more expensive. They're almost 4 to 5 times more expensive.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Any more question?
Well, I'm Devashish Chakraborty, coming from DRDO Research. So, can you please tell me what is the external effect, like winds, etc.?
Yeah.
We'll have a different parameter here altogether?
Yes, wind will certainly be a different parameter. So as of now, we have not included that in our study, but I mean, one way to include that will be to have large fans which can stimulate different wind effects.
Yeah.
So basically the same sort of thing, if you have to translate to a higher story where the ambient wind speed is greater, we'll have to do that.
Okay. So that will change the scenario basically so far as your decisions are concerned, so far as overflow phase basically.
Yes, I believe that will certainly intensify the growth.
Thank you.
I think I'm going to stop the discussion because the time is over. So we can continue the discussion during lunchtime. Let's give the appreciation to the audience.